Hey guys, Josh here, and in this video, I'm going to be ranking every Story of Seasons and every Rune Factory game available for the Nintendo Switch. I made some videos about 2 years ago, one comparing all of the Story of Seasons games, another one comparing all of the Rune Factory games, but we've had quite a few additions since then, and since we're slowly moving towards the Switch 2, I thought it would be fun to just revisit all the games, compare and rank all of them, tell you what I like and dislike about each one, and hopefully it should help you decide what you'd like to play or avoid next. Before we dive into our ranking, I thought it could be interesting to play a little game. Can you guys guess how many games are in today's list? I was actually quite surprised by the number when I was preparing this video, so including every port, remaster, spin-off, crossovers, everything that is Story of Seasons or Rune Factory. If you'd like to play, feel free to pause the video, type a comment, and feel free to let me know also which one is your favorite game, which one you dislike. Once you're ready, we're gonna keep going and take a look at the list. Ready? So here it is, and we have 16 different games to go through today, which is quite an impressive number, and I had the chance to play all of them. We have some more obscure titles in there, so maybe you'll discover something new. Let me just quickly go over all of these different tiers and what they mean for the scope of this video. So any game in the S tier is almost perfect, and if you like farming games, if you like these series, I completely recommend you try them out. Games in the A tier are also excellent. They could be better, but if you like these series, obviously go for them. And then B tiers is when we start seeing some flaws, some games that may not appeal to everybody, and of course I will tell you what I don't like about them. And then C tier, we start getting into some more niche games, games that I would definitely recommend you play if you've already played everything else and you're looking for something new. And then lastly, in the D tier, we have games that are either bad or that I simply cannot recommend for reasons that I will go into whenever we get to these games. Also, keep in mind that I am ranking all of these games relatively to each other. So at the end of the year, I always do a ranking of every farming sim that came out that year. And there's always a lot of very good ones, a lot of very bad ones. But in this video, all of the games are kind of closer to each other in terms of quality. So stuff that would make it maybe into the S rank in my annual ranking, maybe here they will be split into S and A. Maybe something that would be B or C in my annual ranking. Here it's going to be in B, C, and D. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the gap between each of these letters is not as big as in my other videos. And now let's begin for real. We have Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo. And if you're wondering how it made it into this list, first of all, it is the same series in Japan. This series is called Bokujou Monogatari. And up until about 10 years ago, it was called Harvest Moon in the West. And then the name changed to Story of Seasons, but it is the same series. And it is available on the Nintendo Switch Online in the Super Nintendo games. So that's why it's here. And it is the very first game in the series. I think I'll place this one in the B tier. I love revisiting this game. That's where the farming sim genre started. So I think that historically, it is a very important title. You can see all of the core elements of the series. So you have a little bit of farming, ranching, romance, fishing, foraging, but it is a game that is quite flawed. There's a lot of bugs, there's a lot of translation issues, there's honestly not that much content. It gets repetitive, but it still has a charming cast of characters, fun features, and it's the beginning of such an important series. And you know what? I think I might put it in the C tier. Because I think if you don't have the nostalgia for it, or if you don't like replaying old games, I don't know if I would recommend it for newcomers in the series. But if you'd like to see where it all started, I think it's a really fun game to have a look at. Especially if you have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription already, that's included, so it doesn't cost anything more to check it out. And then we have Harvest Moon 64. So this is the first game in this series that I played. It is actually the first video game, not that I played, but that I owned on the Nintendo 64. And I love this game so much. I go back to it almost every year. One thing I love about this one is that the days are super short. So there's a really big time management aspect to it. And it also means that anytime you play, there will be something happening because you can go through a whole season in maybe 3 to 4 hours. So you always have festivals or special events. And even though the game is pretty simple, the fast pace keeps it engaging. This game is also filled with secrets and fun little things to discover. There's a photo album that fills up with pictures as you complete certain achievements, and it can be so fun and challenging trying to get all of them in one playthrough. It also has such an iconic cast of characters that have been around for a long time in the series, like Popori, Ellie, Karen, Thomas. I also absolutely love the music in this game, and it is such a joy. It is so much fun to play. Similarly to Harvest Moon on the Super Nintendo, it might be a little bit hard for newcomers to get into this one just because of the older graphics, which honestly I think the graphics aged pretty well because it has this clay kind of aesthetic to it. I think it is very cute, but still it is kind of old. It is also pretty challenging. So if you're looking for something cozy, it might not necessarily be for you, but if you're looking for a challenge and you have the Nintendo Switch Online, I think it's worth it. I love this game. I love it so much, and I will always love it. Before we talk about the next game, if you are looking for something a bit different, maybe you're tired of farming, you might be interested in the sponsor of today's video, Little Witch in the Woods. I first played this game when it released in early access in 2022. It is finally getting its full release on Steam this September 15th. You play as Ellie, a little witch in the woods, and in order to become a proper witch, she has to help a nearby village and its residents with various quests. As you explore a charming pixel art world, you will forage for materials, brew potions to solve various problems and puzzles, craft furniture and decor to make your witch house as cozy as possible, all in a very narrative-driven experience. You can expect the main story to take you between 8 to 10 hours, and there is up to 20 hours of content if you wish to complete everything. Little Witch in the Woods is $15.99 US, and there is a launch discount of 10% until September 28th. Check it out using the link in the description, and now let's go back to our ranking. Now is when we get into some very obscure games. So we have Bokujou Monogatari, Mobile, Life and Love, and Minori no Shima. So these are two games that released for mobile phones in Japan in the early 2000s, and they were recently re-released for the Nintendo Switch and Steam. The only hiccup with these games, and one of the multiple reasons why I can't really recommend them, is that they're still only in Japanese, so they were ported to modern platforms, but they didn't really change much to the games. You either need to set your region to Japan if you want to get it on the Switch. If you want to play them on Steam, you will be able to find them, but they will only be in Japanese. So I could recommend them if you're looking to learn Japanese. Maybe you're studying Japanese and the vocabulary is quite simple in these games, so maybe they're good games for learning languages, which I would say would be the case for most Story of Seasons games. I think they're great for learning. But yeah, these games were made for mobile phones, and you can definitely feel it when you play them. The controls are a bit clunky. There's a lot of menus, so you have a ranch, a farm where you can move around, but a lot of the interactions you do with the NPCs, all the shops, the villages, everything is done through menus, so especially if you cannot read, that will be difficult. And these games are also quite grindy. You can tell they were designed to be played maybe a little bit every day while you're in the subway going to work or going to school over long periods of time. So it takes quite a bit of work to make progress into these games. Yeah, basically Life and Love was the first one that released. Minori no Shima is the second one, and it has a little bit more content. There's different regions to explore and upgrade, but it's still like a very basic game, and Life and Love is even more basic. So honestly, similarly to Harvest Moon SNES, unless you have you really just want to know where these games came from, you want to see some of the history, and you're a very hardcore fan of the series, I can't really recommend them too much. I played them for like a few hours, but even myself, I can't really get into them. I'm really glad that they're here, that they're archived and preserved, and that they exist, because I never knew I would be able to play these games one day. So they are here, but I can't really recommend them. Next, we also have some other games that I won't be able to recommend to everybody. We have Piczle Cross Story of Seasons, and Piczle Cross Rune Factory. And these ones I actually quite enjoyed. I'm not too sure if I'll put them in C or B. I think I'm gonna put them in the C tier just because they're very niche and won't appeal to everybody. But I think for what they're trying to do and for the price, they are pretty good. So if you're familiar with Picross or nonograms, it is the same type of logic puzzles. So you have a grid, and on each line you have these numbers that give you hints as to which squares you have to fill out. So you fill out all of these squares, and then at the end you get a picture that is going to be either a Story of Seasons or Rune Factory character, crop, monster, tool, things from these games. And honestly, these puzzles are so relaxing, so enjoyable. I've played the Story of Seasons one for 40 hours, the Rune Factory one for 30 hours, and they are very similar, so I would just go for whichever series you prefer if you are into puzzle games. I will say that the Rune Factory game has a bit more content. So you have the black and white puzzles, but you also have colored ones, which adds another layer to the puzzle because you have to find out which color each square is going to be. You also have these battle puzzles where you have a time limit to complete the puzzles. It also has a tiny bit more customization. So you have this farm in the background and you can choose which crops are going to show up or which monsters will be alongside your character. But overall, it is still pretty basic. Don't expect much more than puzzles. One issue that I have with both of these games is that they have a lot of typos, inconsistencies, little bugs and glitches here and there. Nothing really game-breaking, and I think that some of it was fixed for the Steam versions. But on Switch, these games have been out for a while and they've never really been fixed. So one little example that comes to mind, I know that in Piczle Cross Story of Seasons, you can see all of the music and it tells you which game the music is from and all of the Pioneers of Olive Town tracks. It says Pioneers with 3 E's, so Pioneers, and that's just never been fixed. So you can tell that the quality control is not necessarily there. And I know these games they're licensed, but they're made by a very, very small team, mostly a solo developer. So I guess the developer just moved on to something else, but I wish there was just a little bit more quality control, I guess. Now, speaking of licensed games, we have 2 other titles that were made by different teams, and they're crossovers with Doreamon. So we have Doreamon Story of Seasons and Doreamon Story of Seasons Friends of the Great Kingdom. So first thing, let me tell you, I don't care about Doreamon as a franchise. I didn't grow up with Doreamon. I have no attachment to Doreamon, anything, but still, I love these games. I think I'm gonna put the first Doreamon game in the A tier and Friends of the Great Kingdom in the S tier. And honestly, even though they may look very different on the surface, these games very much so feel like pure classic farming sims. Later in this video, we will talk about Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, but these 2 games remind me of that one because just the farming feels similar, the mining feels similar, the festivals, it really just has that classic vibe. But they're also a lot more story-driven. They have a lot of dialogue, a lot of cutscenes. One thing I love too is that each of the different families and characters have their own plotline, their own storyline that you get to uncover as you play. So you have a fun gameplay, fun characters, but now you might be wondering, why did I put the first game in A tier and the second one S tier if I love them both so much? Well, the first game is extremely grindy, and even myself, I love grinding in farming games, but upgrading your tools or buying any upgrades for your farm will take you such a long time. The game is also very story heavy at the beginning, where I feel like a lot of people might just drop it before they actually even get into the game. So the pacing is not the best, and it's sometimes very hard to progress into the story because you have to have your relationships at certain levels, you have to be at the right place at the right time, and you can end up spending weeks and weeks into the game trying to figure out how to progress the story and not being able to trigger anything. So for a game that is pretty story-driven, it is a bit confusing or difficult to play without a guide, but still, I put 50 hours into this one. I don't know if I'll go back to it, but I had a good time. Now with Friends of the Great Kingdom, you can tell the developers really listened to the feedback, and maybe they went even a little bit too hard in the other direction, where, especially at the beginning, progression is extremely fast. You can make so much money very quickly, buy a lot of animals, buy a lot of farm upgrades, which scared me at first, but I'm now close to 70 hours into this game. I still have a lot to do. I just finished the main story. The pacing slowed down a little bit, and I'm really enjoying trying to get everything done. It also added a lot of quality of life features. You have a quest trackers where now you can actually see what you need to progress your different quests. It tells you where to go, and I don't typically like when a game holds my hand too much, and that's not what it's doing. It's just giving you the right amount of guidance because the first game did not tell you anything. One thing that may not appeal to everybody in these two games is that you play as Nobi. He's a kid, so obviously there's no romance mechanic, but you still get to befriend all of the different characters. And even if you don't know or care about Doreamon, you will get to enjoy the story, all the characters. And in Friends of the Great Kingdom, you actually live with your friends, and you can get them to follow you around and work with you, so you can water your crops together, fish together, go mining together. So even if you don't actually have a family, I feel like it has one of the best relationships or like family dynamics in the entire series. For once, it feels like you're not alone doing everything, and that is something I'd like to see in more games in the future. Now, let's talk about Rune Factory. We have 4 games to go through. We'll start with Rune Factory 3 Special, which I will put in the A tier. So this is a port or remaster of Rune Factory 3, which originally came out for the Nintendo DS. And if you don't know much about the Rune Factory series, it started as a spin-off of Story of Seasons, which at the time was known under the name Harvest Moon. It takes a lot of the same mechanics, so you have the farming, fishing, relationships, but it has more RPG elements, so you have lots of different things to level up. There's crafting, alchemy, combat, dungeons, and there is usually a bigger emphasis on the story, so you can expect a lot of reading. You also have fantasy elements in it, so dragons and all of that. So if you are looking for an RPG or a game with a bit more action, then you might like Rune Factory. Going back to Rune Factory 3 Special, it is mostly the same thing as the original Rune Factory 3 on the DS. They reworked some of the textures, models, added a few things here and there, but it is at its core an older game than the ones we're going to talk about next. So keep in mind, it is missing some quality of life features. So for example, if you put an item in your shipping bin by accident, you won't be able to take it back. Also, you can only play as a boy, so there's no girl character. There's also no same-sex marriage. The story is on the shorter side, so I think if you are looking to maybe get into the Rune Factory series, it could be a good one to start with without too much of a time commitment. You can beat it in 15 to 20 hours. That being said, there is a ton of endgame content. So I'm about 50 hours into this one. There's a long endgame dungeon, a ton of things to craft, a fun cast of characters to befriend and romance. The story is short and sweet, but there's a lot you can do once you're done, and I'm just so glad they brought this one back. But it might get overshadowed by Rune Factory 4 Special, which received a very similar treatment. So this is a port / remaster of Rune Factory 4 that was on the Nintendo 3DS. So a few additions, some things were reworked here and there, but it is pretty much the same thing, same game. And I'll put this one in the S tier because it just has so much more content. First of all, it has more quality of life features than in Rune Factory 3 Special. So if you put something in the shipping bin by accident, you will be able to take it back. You can play either as a boy or as a girl, but there's no same-sex marriage. The story is much longer. There is also a great amount of endgame content. The world is bigger. There's just so much to do. You have tons of side quests. The dialogue in this game is one of the best in the series, where characters always say different things based on what's happening in the world. It is really good. It also gets a bit grindy at one point. It gets challenging. It might be one of the most challenging games in this entire tier list, so if you're looking for a bit of difficulty, that could be a one to look into. And I don't know why, I played over 100 hours of this game on the 3DS when it came out, but I only have about 25 hours on the Switch version. I think it's just because when this game came out, I was busy with other things, and I just didn't play it as much as I would have loved to. But it is an absolutely fantastic game that I do want to go back to and properly finish at some point. We could say that Rune Factory 4 is the pinnacle of the Rune Factory series, with just so much content, so much to do, and for this reason it could maybe feel overwhelming to some players, which is why I think Rune Factory 3 could be a better starting point, just because it is shorter and a little bit simpler, so maybe a good one to get into. But one thing you may want to know is that both of these games are top-down remasters of DS and 3DS games. Maybe you're just not into that, you want 3D. So that's when Rune Factory 5 comes into the scene. And unfortunately, this one is gonna go in the B tier. So Rune Factory 5 disappointed me for a multitude of reasons. So I was really hyped, really excited for a 3D Rune Factory games because the previous 3D ones were on the Wii with Tides of Destiny and Frontier. I absolutely love those games. I was hoping for something similar, but I just found the world to not be that immersive. The environments were very lacking, very empty. The world was just not that fun to explore. It also suffered from a few performance issues, especially on the original Switch, but that's not really what bothered me. I think my biggest gripe is its difficulty or lack thereof. So there's actually different modes, so there's easy, normal, and hard, but even in hard mode, you can breeze through the entire game without really thinking about it. One big thing in the Rune Factory series is that most weapons and monsters have different elements, so you can have a fire monster, a water monster. You also have all of these status effects, so some monsters can poison you, paralyze you. And in the older games, I found that there was a bit more preparation and planning required between each of the dungeons, so you had to discover recipes for better weapons, try to find the crafting materials to make them. Maybe you would have to level up or grind a little bit, and then when you were ready, you would tackle the next dungeon. But in Rune Factory 5, I feel like you just follow the points on the map. That's also one thing, they show you everything on the map, where to go all the time, so it holds your hand a lot. You can easily go through the whole game without facing any hurdles. And considering that the selling point of the Rune Factory series is the combination of farming and RPG combat, the fact that the RPG and combat portion was underwhelming made the entire game feel underwhelming. Also, I should point out that, at least for me, the farming and wrenching in Rune Factory games never feels as fun or satisfying as in Story of Seasons. So if the farming is not really fun, the combat is not really fun, I will have a hard time. But with that being said, it might sound like I hate this game, but I actually played it over 390 hours in, I think, 3 different save files. But there are better options for Rune Factory on the Switch, such as Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. So this one I'll put in the A tier, and it is the latest entry in the series. It is also a spin-off, so it does a lot of the mechanics differently. So let's start with those differences. So the first thing is that it takes place in the eastern land of Azuma, inspired by traditional Japan. So the environment, the music, the atmosphere, the characters, a lot of it feels very different. And also, you have these 4 seasonal villages that you need to rebuild. So this is one of these games where, yeah, you get to build villages. So you're gonna craft different buildings, place them, tons of decor items, ways to customize your villages, rank them up. And as you do all of that, it will also increase the stats of your character. So if you are looking for a game with customization, that could be a good one to get into. One very positive point for this game too is that in terms of visuals, they really stepped it up compared to Rune Factory 5. The character models, the lighting, the environments, there's just so many more details. A lot more cutscenes, voice acting, animations. All of this makes the game very immersive. Also, the characters are great, the story is amazing. So everything surrounding the presentation is top-notch. But it is still very far from a perfect game. Yes, decorating your villages is fun, and there is a whole village management side to the game where you recruit villagers, give them different tasks, which, by the way, kind of automates the farming, so you won't be doing that much farming in this game. And the village management seems very interesting at first, but in the end, it is pretty shallow and simple. When it comes to the combat and dungeons, it feels very fun. It is very fluid, very smooth. The animations are great. You have these sacred treasures, which are special weapons that are just so fun to use. But it suffers from the same problems as Rune Factory 5, where all of it is very easy. You can simply breeze through the whole story. And even though the game has so many cool mechanics and systems related to the combat, none of it really matters that much because the game is that easy. So the story being pretty easy will take you about 50 hours, and I actually managed to put 100 hours into this game. But if you are a completionist and you want to spend a ton of time on this game, there is not as much to do, as much endgame content as in Rune Factory 3, 4, and 5. For example, most of the other Rune Factory games have a shipping list where you can see all of the items you've ever shipped, and it can be a really fun challenge to try to sell all of the items that are in the game. Unfortunately, that is not a thing in this game, so there's not as much content for completionists. The endgame dungeon is also very underwhelming, super short and easy. So for me, Guardians of Azuma is a game where I did one playthrough, really enjoyed it, but I don't think it has a lot of replayability, and I don't see myself going back to it. You know what? Looking at this, I want to move a few things around. So Rune Factory 5 will go in the C tier, and Guardians of Azuma will go in B, because I still thoroughly enjoyed Rune Factory 3 and 4 more than Azuma. So moving a few things around. And now it's time to get into the mainline Story of Seasons games for the Nintendo Switch. We will go in order of release, starting with Story of Seasons Friends of Mineral Town, which is a remake of Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town that originally released on the Game Boy Advance. If you didn't know, that one was a remake of Harvest Moon Back to Nature for the PlayStation 1, and Harvest Moon Back to Nature was a remake of Harvest Moon 64 on the 64. Well, it was supposed to be a port that actually ended up being so different. Anyway, so it's a remake of a remake of a remake of a remake. So it is a pretty old, well, it's kind of a new game, but it is based on an older one. I'm going to be placing it in the B tier. I was hesitating between A and B. I think the thin is pretty line between those tiers. So this is a fairly faithful remake. Obviously, the art style is quite different because they went from pixel art to these 3D models in a very chibi style. In terms of gameplay, there are a few things that were removed, a few things that were added, some quality of life features to modernize it a little bit. But in short, to keep it simple for this video, it is pretty close to the original. If you like the classic formula that's in Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo, Harvest Moon 64, but you want something a bit more modern, I think this could be a good pick. For me, I have about 65 hours into this game, and I love going back to it when I need something simple, when I just want to farm and play a bit more mindlessly. Mineral Town is truly a staple, but if you are a newcomer to the series and you're scared that there might not be enough to do in this game for you, then that's when I would suggest maybe Doreamon Story of Seasons Friends of the Great Kingdom, as they feel similar in a lot of ways, but Friends of the Great Kingdom just has way more content. Next, we have a very divisive game, the first new Story of Seasons game that came out on the Switch that was not a remake or anything like that. Story of Seasons Pioneers of Olive Town. This one I will put in the C tier, right alongside Rune Factory 5. I feel like these two games just have so much in common. They looked very ambitious. We were all very excited for them. They brought in some new ideas, but in the end, you can feel they were maybe a little bit rushed and ended up disappointing. So one of the big features of Olive Town is that you can decorate your farm. So you have these 3 areas on your farm where you can place furniture, you can move the buildings around. That was very exciting at the beginning, but quickly enough, you see all of the constraints. So for example, you can't put anything on top of paths. You can't rotate the furniture. Oh, by the way, just a very quick tangent on decorating. I forgot to mention that Doreamon Story of Seasons Friends of the Great Kingdom does offer a lot of options. You can decorate. You have 2 pretty large fields on your farm. Lots of different furniture sets. You can place paths, furniture, fences. Same thing for the first Doreamon game, but because the first one is so grindy, it will take you the longest time just to get the simplest items. Out of all of these games that we're talking about today, I would say that the game with the strongest decorating system is probably Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. But in terms of Olive Town, yeah, the decorating is a little bit clunky. And you also have all of these makers. So to process materials, right, to turn your wool into yarn, wood into lumber, eggs into mayonnaise, you have these makers that you place on your farm. They don't look really good. They're kind of ugly. They take up so much space. And managing them is kind of hectic. This game is almost just like a maker's management game where you're always just putting things in your makers to transform them. And I have to say, they did improve the game after its launch. So initially, you had to put things one by one in the maker. And then they did an update where you could queue up to 10 items. So it is a bit better now, but still not the best. And then it doesn't help that the cast of characters is not that great. The story is very easy. So basically, your goal is to restore Olive Town, make it popular again so you have a lot of tourists. And most of the quests are so simple, so you have to redo the roads and you're gonna have to give like 5 bricks or like 5 pieces of lumber. And all of it just feels underwhelming. But still, in the end, I had a good time with Olive Town. All in all platforms combined, I think 3 or 4 different playthroughs. I have 485 hours with this game. I think beating the story might take you maybe 30 to 50 hours. And if you want to 100% the game, get all of the guardian fish, cook all of the recipes. Oh, that's one thing I love with this game. You have these cooking requests where you have to cook specific meals with a certain quality level. I really liked doing those. And it also has an encyclopedia, which is what I wanted to have in Azuma, where you can see all of the items you had, all of the dishes you cooked. So if you are a completionist, I think you can put 100 hours into this game. So that's why I'm close to 500, because I've played it quite a few times. Definitely not my favorite Story of Seasons game on the Switch. But just like with Rune Factory 5, you can tell that Marvelous learned a lot from this game. The feedback it received and the next entries will be better. Next, we have Story of Seasons A Wonderful Life, which is a remake of Harvest Moon A Wonderful Life, originally released for the GameCube. There was also another Wonderful Life, which was the girl version, and the special edition, which was on the PS2. So this one kind of combines all of these 3 together to make one game. It got a very similar treatment to Friends of Mineral Town. Pretty faithful remake, but obviously all of the assets were made from scratch. It's modernized, some features were taken away, some features were added. We have same-sex marriage. What makes this game different is that its progression is based in chapters. So there are 6 chapters, and every year a chapter will end and things will change in the town. So after the first year, you get married, your character ages a little bit, a lot of the other villagers age as well. New ones move into the town, and then you have a child, and every year your child grows a little bit. There's also lots of cutscenes with your family, with your kid. You can even influence what job your kid will do in the future when the game ends. So it is a very interesting progression story, and something we don't see in a lot of farming games. But it is also very slow-paced, and after the first 2 or 3 in-game years, maybe even earlier, you realize that there's not too much to do. So you'll do a bit of farming and ranching, of course, but there's really not that many shops or activities to do in town. Basically, there's only one little festival or event per season, but it is very minimal. In your free time, you can go to this small, tiny dig site where you can dig for artifacts. There's a bit of fishing you can do. And don't get me wrong, there are some fun mechanics. And they did add a few things, so there's now a request system. You also have more things to work towards, all of these music records that you can unlock, tool upgrades, all of that. So they did add some stuff, but still you can tell it is a pretty old game and the pace is just very slow. And I'm close to 195 hours into this one, so I have 2 save files, but I actually did not reach the end into any of them because I just got bored before reaching that point. And I think they could have made it a little bit more exciting. If you have nostalgia for the original Wonderful Life, I think it could be worth trying. Or maybe if you get it on sale. Actually, most of these games go on pretty steep sales, especially on Steam. You can find them for 30-50% off. But if you're looking for a fresh experience with so much to do, this won't be the one. I have to say though, one thing I love about A Wonderful Life is the environments. the sound effects, like you walk around and you can hear the river, you can hear birds, bugs. The seasons change gradually, so instead of going from the last day of autumn to the first day of winter and seeing abrupt changes, well, you can start seeing some snowfall at the end of fall. There might be a bit of snow left at the beginning of spring. So the changes are very gradual, and it's just like a very relaxing game. It's immersive, and you just want to like stay in that world, fish slowly, admire the environment. It's certainly one of the most cozy and relaxing. Now, last but not least, we have Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, which just released on August 27th, so less than a month ago. This one, I'm putting it in the S tier. I've been so obsessed with this game, which is kind of a reimagined version of Harvest Moon Grand Bazaar that was on the Nintendo DS. So as you saw with Friends of Mineral Town and A Wonderful Life, those two games were remakes, and they suffered a little bit from the fact that they didn't have that much new content. They were good for the nostalgia factor, but maybe not that great for new people to get into the series and enjoy these games as much as they enjoy newer farming games. But with Grand Bazaar, they really listened to the feedback, also listened to the feedback from Olive Town. So it's kind of a remake, but it just adds so much. It rewrites a lot of the dialogue, the cutscenes. The characters have like deeper personalities. We have a lot of new gameplay mechanics. So it's kind of a hybrid between remake and brand new game. But honestly, I think most people would not even know that it is a remake if they're not familiar with the original Grand Bazaar. So I treat this one as a brand new game. And it is my favorite game in all of this tier list. It reminds me a bit of Guardians of Azuma in the way that the presentation is on a whole other level. The graphics are the best we've seen in the series so far. There are so many little details everywhere. The animations are great. It feels polished. There is voice acting, which gives life to all of the characters. All of the cutscenes are very engaging, and it truly feels like a 2025 title and a great step in the right direction for Story of Seasons. In terms of gameplay, the main feature here is that instead of selling your stuff in a shipping bin like you would in most games, there is this bazaar every Saturday, and you go there to run your little shop and sell all of your goods. So typically with these games, there is this very addictive daily loop where you're doing all of your chores for the day, and then you go to bed, and then you tell yourself, oh, I want to play just one more day. So in this game, there is that, but there's also under it like a weekly loop where every week you have to prepare for the next bazaar. You're looking forward to it. You tell yourself you're gonna play just one more week so you get to the bazaar. And it makes it very hard to stop playing. The bazaar is also where you buy most of your things, so you can buy new seeds, upgrades for your fields. And as you generate money at the bazaar, you unlock new shops and more products for the existing ones. There's also a trend mechanic, so every month in the game there are 4 random trends, which are products that will sell for more money, and it kind of changes the way you play. So one month, certain crops could be more valuable, so you'll focus on that. Another month, it could be fish, so you're going to do a lot of fishing. It could be cheese or yogurt, so you'll focus on your animals, certain types of food. And I love how it makes every season or playthrough feel so different. Also, one issue I've had with a lot of the more recent games is just how easy they were. But this one has a bit more difficulty, and there is a small layer of strategy to it. Not only because of the trends mechanic, but also your fields are pretty small, your storage is limited. There's a freshness system where if you keep certain items for too long, their value will decrease. All of the food in the game gives you different buffs, so some food will give you a higher chance of getting rare crops. Some food will give you a bonus when you pet your animals. Also, days go by pretty quickly, so there is this element of time management to it. And you can definitely play it and just like enjoy it at your own pace without overthinking. But if you want to make the most out of it, you want to challenge yourself, there's a lot of fun mechanics that keep the experience engaging and not just a mindless grind. That's really what I've been wanting for this series, just something with more engaging gameplay. And I can tell this one will have so much replayability. In fact, I've already completed the main story twice, so I did 2 save files, 50 hours each. So I'm at 100 hours in total, and I'm just now jumping into the end game. I still wish the main story took a bit longer as I found myself reaching all of the goals very quickly, but I still have plenty of things to work towards in the endgame. There's of course an encyclopedia to complete, so if I want to try to get all of the dishes, upgrade all of my crops to the maximum level, work on all of my relationships, and also there's lots of little perks and things, special items you get from villagers when you befriend them in this game. Tons of in-game achievements to complete as well. I can see myself putting so many more hours into this game, and because of the trends mechanic, I feel like every playthrough is going to feel fresh, making it a fun game to start over and revisit once in a while. I could talk about this game for hours, but I think this video is probably already pretty long. If you'd like to hear more about Grand Bazaar, I have a review that's about 40 minutes long. I also have a bunch of videos on most of these games, so I'll put all of these in the descriptions if you'd like to know more about a specific title. I just love this series so much, I could honestly just talk about it all day, which is pretty much what I'm doing on this channel. But now, let me know what you think. What is your ranking? Do you agree or disagree with my ranking? And I'm looking at Mineral Town and A Wonderful Life. I'm tempted to bring them back into A. I don't know, it's very tough. I feel like my A and B in this list, they're almost the same, A and B. But yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks as well to Little Witch in the Woods for sponsoring this video. Feel free to check out the game. Leave a like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.